Welcome to Unite Now, where we bring unity to you, wherever you are.
Welcome everyone to this live stream. Today we'll go deep dive with post-processing, color grading. Daniel Sanchez, your co-instructor for today. And this session, I'm an UCI, Unity Certified Instructor, and I'm an indie developer at my own studio called Networkon. As you can notice, my native language is in English, so in advance, my apologies if something I said is weird to you. And your main instructor is Nicolas Borromeo, so I'll let him to introduce himself.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolas Borromeo. I'm also not an English native speaker. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, but I'm currently living in London, working as a Unity senior developer in a company called Product Madness. Before this job, I worked for 8 years as a Unity teacher. I'm also a Unity Certified Instructor and developer. And well, I'm pretty glad to meet you today and share this session.
Well, we have a couple of answers right now. Everything, at least everyone have used the lighting, so it's pretty cool. We are setting our mood today, so lighting is a pretty common feature. Well, today we have two amazing moderators, Ethan and James. They will help you with anything you may need meanwhile you follow this session, and they give you all the links you need to follow through via chat. So again, make sure you have the chat open. I strongly encourage you to drop all your questions in the Q&A tab rather than the chat. We are seeing the chat and the Q&A, but please use the Q&A for your questions. And thank you so much for being here. Let the session start.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I will be taking over from here. So, okay, everybody can see my session goals slide, I think. Great. So, in this session, we are going to basically explore the color grading effect of the post-processing stack. We are going to see how to enable post-processing in your project, how to enable color grading, and how to use it to improve the look and feel of your scene. Also applying tone mapping. And the deep dive part is going to be in a way where we are going to explore the concepts behind all of this, not just toggling and setting the effect, but also understanding the underlying concepts. So, some ground rules before starting. If you never attended any live session, remember that you will have recordings of those sessions to catch up later. If you want to review, you can download the Unity project and follow along. We are going to do some exercises so you can download the project, do them. If you can't download the project or you don't have the exact Unity version you need, just watch. It's perfectly okay not to follow the exercises. It's up to you. Then remember to use the Q&A panel just for questions and the chat panel just for comments. What else? Well, we are going to see this link later, so we can skip that. And remember that this session will be recorded, even the messages in the chat and Q&A panel, so please be kind with all the fellows companions here. Also, you will be seeing in the slides that in the top right corner, there is going to be 3 icons determining what you need to do in each moment. If you see the watch icon, just watch. Don't do anything. You will have do moments later, specific slides for say, okay, now do certain exercise. And you will have a moment to explore and just do whatever you want and create nice effects in this case. So pay attention to the 3 icons in the slides to know when to do what. So aside from this introduction, we are going to right now prepare the project. We are going to see how to download and open the project. Then we are going to just recap post-processing. We are not going to deep dive on that part specifically because this post-processing is huge. It has lots and lots of effects. So just we are going to install post-processing in the project, and then we are going to apply color grading, apply tone mapping, and then just do nice stuff with the controls of color grading. So let's start with the simplest part, how to open the projects if you want to follow along. This is the URL. Just remember, don't do anything now. Remember that this is the icon that says just watch. I'm going to do this first. You will have time to do that later. So you will go later. I'm going to this URL, download color grading zip, and extract it in any project, any folder of your computer you want. So in my case, I already did that. I already gone to that URL. In a moment, you will do that. And I extracted the zip file, and you will find that it's a whole Unity project. So it's not a package as other live sessions, it's just a project. So in a moment you will do that. So after you do that, you will open Unity Hub and open the projects, going to the project tab, clicking the add button, and looking for the project folder. In my case, again, I already opened Unity Hub here. So I go to the projects tab, add button, look for the folder inside the zip. Remember that you will need to find the folder that has the assets inside, the assets folders, library, packages inside. So if you have an assets folder containing in this color grading folder, just open that one. So in the case, I will be selecting this one, click on open, and you will notice that the project will be added to the projects list in the Unity Hub. Now to open, you just click it. So that is the basic step to open the project. So before continuing, now is a do moment. Remember the icon here. We will give you 5 minutes to download the project from this URL and open it. So now we have prepared the project. We are going to go to the part about talking about post-processing. So what post-processing is actually? Okay, you know, the way the camera renders the scene it's not exactly, by no means, to how our eyes or camera, real-life camera works. So sometimes we need to apply certain effects to simulate stuff like depth of field, blurring images outside the focus point, or bloom, simulate the bleeding of light around the edges of an emissive object. And sometimes, even in real-life cameras, we want to apply more effects on top of that to improve the image dramatically in ways that the real life cannot generate, actually. So post-processing is all kind of effects that happens after the scene is rendered that deals with the final image. It improves the final image generated by the camera in ways a per-object rendering cannot achieve. So remember, post-processing has lots of effects like bloom, depth of field, and color grading. Today we are just going to be focused on color grading. So in your project, you need to install the package. In your project, I mean in your real-life project, in your work project, or in your personal project. In the project you just have downloaded, it's already installed. But just in case, I'm going to recap the steps I did to install the package in this project. So basically, we need to install a new package in the package manager. Now I go to Window Package Manager. Make sure that you have the all packages mode set, because in newer Unity versions, sometimes it just shows you the ones you have installed. I need to see all of them, the ones that I don't have installed, actually. And look for the post-processing package, and then click Install here. So in your project, let me see where, here. In your project, you can go to Window, here, Package Manager. You can see that in my case, in the project you have downloaded, the post-processing is already installed because it says up to date. Also, you can see that you need to wait a moment to the list to populate. So if in your work project or in your personal project, you came here and you don't see an install button, instead an up-to-date button, you are ready to go. Let me just remove this. Okay, no problem. So that's step one. Step two, post-processing have the concept of volumes. The idea is that you can define areas in your scene where certain effects will be applied. You can say, I don't know, maybe in an indoors space, maybe a room or something like that, you want to apply certain effects. And in the outdoors, in maybe a garden or in a park, you want to apply other. So you can fill the whole scene with volumes encompassing the areas you want the effects to be applied. In our case, we are going to do the simpler case. We are going to just generate a global volume. So actually, our volume being global will be applied in every place of the scene, regardless of the camera position. So basically, our volume won't have any shape. It will be applied just to the whole scene. So how you prepare a global volume? You need to create an empty game object, add the post-processing volume component, and check the global checkbox here. Again, we already have done that for you. Remember, you need to look right now for what I'm doing. But in the project you have downloaded, you can go to the Start Here scene, and you will notice that we have created a post-processing volume with the post-processing volume component and with the is global checked. And you can see that I haven't added any shape, like maybe a box collider or some of them, because it's a global volume. It doesn't need a shape. But if by any chance you need to specify a specific area, you can uncheck the is global checkbox, and you can see that the area, the size of the collider is the size or the area of the post-processing volume. Again, in our case, you don't need that. You don't need to change any of the original settings. These are just fine. Okay, so another step you need to do in your own project. The post-processing layer component is one that needs to be added to the cameras. You know, in a project, you can have several cameras, and you want to select which cameras have which effects. Or maybe a camera that don't have any effect at all. So basically, a post-processing layer will be added to the cameras that will have an effect, and also you will specify through the layer component which volumes will affect this camera. You can have several volumes that affect different cameras. In our case, again, we have a simpler scenario. It's just one volume, one layer. You have done the basic setup, but this is prepared to tackle more complex scenarios. So how in your other project you can add post-processing? Okay, you first need to create a layer. We need to have a way to specify or identify our volumes, and this is through layers, to the regular Unity layers. So in the layer manager, I have added a post-processing layer. In the post-processing volume, I have tagged or set the layer of the volume to this post-processing layer. And in the post-processing layers, yes, too many layers, sorry for that. But in the post-processing layer component in the main camera, I say, okay, this camera is going to interact with the volumes that have the post-processing layer. Again, this is done. So you can observe that this main camera already have the post-processing layer. The post-processing layer is set up to interact with object that has the post-processing layer. Remember that if you don't remember how to create layers, you can go here to layer, add layer in any object, whatever object you want, you go to this option, and you can create as many layers as you want, or up to 32 actually. And now that our camera is configured to interact with post-processing volumes, you can go to the actual volume and set the layer. So layer with the volume with the post-processing layer, the camera with the post-processing layer component, configured to interact with the post-processing layer. So this is done just for you to know. And finally, once all of that was configured, you need to create a post-processing profile. The post-processing profile is an asset, like a material or a texture, is another kind of assets that have the settings about which exact effects you want to apply to this camera and its configurations. So it's basically the analogous of a material to a mesh renderer. This is the material, quotation marks, of our post-processing volume. So you need to select the post-processing volume to create one using the new button here already. You can click the Add Effect button to add an effect from the, you will have some options. You will select the effect you want. And in our case, we are going to, in this example, I choose bloom. You can tick any of these sets to change its original value. In that case, you can click intensity and raise up. Why I chose bloom? Because I just wanted to test that post-processing is working. We are not going to see bloom. So in our case, we have already done that. We click in new, clicking in new created this asset. And in the add effect, we added, and actually in the project is added color grading. So just to test, you don't need to do that. Just to show you that it is working, I will add the bloom effect, tick intensity, and increase it. And you can see how the holy, the holy grail is there right now. So basically, this is just to test that post-processing is working. Just that. So in our case, I will just remove it. So remember, new to create the profile, add effect, and select the specific effect you are looking for, and click it, and just try moving its properties until something is done. So now we are sure that the post-processing is working. So I removed blooms because we are not going to see it. So if you are confused about this step, remember that you don't need to do that. I'm pretty intense with that, but it's just for you to focus on what is important right now. But in the Learn side of this session, you will find more tutorials with a more explained or more detailed steps on post-processing. In our case, now the real stuff starts. We are about to talking about color grading, an effect of the post-processing stack. But before talking about that one, I want to talk about mood. What's mood? You know, each game has its own idea. It's not the same doing a terror game, that a fantasy game, that a game for children's. And we need to set up a mood. The game is happy, it's happening in a cold area, in a sad moment, in a happy moment. The game is set up in a specific scenario or mood. How we can establish that our game is happy, or our game is sad, or our game is terror? Well, you are using several ways to communicate that mood. Sounds and images in our case. So how images can transmit that mood, aside from the models you're using or the images you're using, through color. Color is a powerful way to transmit emotions or ideas. So you could say, okay, but my models already have textures and I really added light to the scene. Yeah, okay, but sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we need to tweak them. So you can start working with the colors of the textures, you can start working with the colors of the lights, and you can achieve a specific mood. But let's say that you changed your mind. You wanted to change from sad to maybe not so sad, to normal, or you changed the idea of your game. To change the mood, again, you need to go to retweak all the textures and retweak all the lighting, and that will take lots of time. And sometimes you want to just test ideas. So faster, in a way to change the mood of the scene is through color grading, basically. Color grading is an effect that basically distorts or changes the colors of your scene to a set of filters. It's like when you add an Instagram filter to the photos of you are taking. You know, when you try different effects, you can say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. You can try easily changing just in one centralized place all the colors of your scene without needing to author the textures and the lightings and everything. And also, color grading can achieve effects that maybe even real calculation of lighting cannot achieve, because games relies on the idea that reality is not fun. We need to change reality to make it funnier. That's the whole idea of a video game, right? So changing how real life rendering in quotation marks work is through this kind of effects. Non-realistic effects, but nice effects to see. Like movies, actually. This actually is an effect that came from the film industry. So let's start trying this idea. And you will notice that color grading have lots and lots of ways to change the colors, to alter the colors. In this case, we are just going to test for this first moment the tone controls here. So how we can start testing this? First, in color grading effect that you need to add, and this you are going to do in a moment, you need to check mode and set low definition range. We are going to talk more about this later, so just do it for now. Remember, I'm going to do that. And we are going to use the color filter to generate a matrix effect. You can see here that actually matrix use color grading to identify where you are in the matrix and where you are out of the matrix. In matrix, everything is bluish. Outside of matrix, everything is bluer. So we are going to do that effect. So in this case, we can select color filter and just apply a tint to the whole scene. You can basically apply a tint here. We can increase a little bit of the saturation and the contrast here to improve and deepen the effect even further. So let's try this. Let me try this. So again, in your case, you already have that, but just in case, remember to add effect Unity color grading if you don't have that effect added. Check mode to light definition range. Check filter, click the color, and in this case, I will set some kind of green. Try with when you are working with post-processing, try to be gentle. Don't use extreme values like this unless you really want to. In this case, to achieve my example, just a little bit of green is enough. So we can improve saturation here. You can see how saturation, again, don't go extreme, just maybe a little bit, or maybe a little less, depending on what you're looking. I'm going to increase saturation. And you can see, if you're not familiar with the concept of saturation, saturation just like increases the intensity of the colors. This is too much. Maybe here is okay. How I choose this? Because I like it. No, there is no other reason. You try to find a profile that likes you. Also, we can increase contrast a little bit. You can see that contrast with make highlights brighter and darks lower. And if you are not sure about the changes you made, you can just check and uncheck color grading and see the before and after. And you can clearly see that those little changes make a lot of changes. And now we are in some kind of matrix by itself. So that's a simple first step to try the color grading. Several options we have. So it's your moment to do right now. What I want you to do, again, enable the color grading and set the low definition, low definition range mode. It's not LDR, but sorry. And then apply a color filter, but this time with a blue tint, play a little bit with saturation and contrast, and try to achieve a look like the one in the image. So again, you have 5 minutes. Let's do this until 35. So it's your time.
Nicolas, if you can go to the previous slide, and some people are asking about timeline, cinemachine, pretty cool effects that they can achieve and they can animate in some way with this color grading. So,
okay.
But
I mean, to be honest, I never tried. If I need to guess, you probably can do that. We can try if we have time at the end of the session. We can try, but I'm pretty sure it's possible through the animation window of Unity. I mean, timeline. Remember that it just plays clips made in the animation window, so you can try creating an animation window, and you can try add an animation controller to the post-processing volume and create a clip there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Actually, it's a pretty cool example of Unity. It's like a racing car game. I don't know exactly where that is. I think it's in the timeline tutorials. You can watch it, and there's a pretty cool effect with Cinemachine cameras and Cinemachine and post-processing. You can in some way blend those post-processing profiles, those volumes you can blend and create a pretty cool effect. Something like if you're driving inside a tunnel and you are reaching the the light outside, you have a pretty cool effect that blinds you for just a few seconds. That's a pretty cool effect you can achieve with multiple volumes and blending those. Yeah, blending those volumes to different profiles. One in any volume, and yeah, if you want to make like a cinematic, it's pretty cool to use this to set your mood. As Nicolas said, set your mood is something you may change in the development of your game, but you can achieve it really quick with these examples. This about the blue matrix effect, it's pretty cool. It's a must if you want to give your players a correct environment. So there's a couple of questions about LDR mode and HDR mode. When to use one of those?
Yeah, we are going to talk about LDR and HDR in just a moment. For now, just hold that question for later, please. Also, in case you are wondering, when Daniel was referring to blending, it's just making two volumes overlap. So you can make two cubes overlap in some area, and when the camera is in that overlap moment, it will like blend the two volumes. Okay, guys, 5 minutes have passed. Remember, if you couldn't do this, you will have time later. So for now, remember to pay attention. Just in case, a little recap of what just we did. Add effect, color grading, if you already don't have it. Enable LDR just for now. We are going to change it in just a moment. Color filter, whatever color you want. In this case, I was looking for green. Increase the saturation a little bit to make the colors like more vivid. And increase contrast to also make the highlights pop up. Just because I like it, not any other reason about that. Also, actually, you can see that the color filtering is actually dimming the light a little bit because of how tinting works. Remember that tinting just, in this case, because I'm tinting green, the red and blue channels are getting lower, so the overall image is getting a little bit dimmer. So increasing the contrast can somewhat correct that, also can bring brightness to that. But contrast have a nicer effect in my opinion. So that's how you apply a basic, very basic color grading. Color grading can do much, much more, but let's keep continuing investigating it. And now let's talk about LDR and HDR. We are going to talk first about LDR and HDR rendering. We are not referring to the famous HDR of TVs. We are going to talk about that in a little bit later, but we are going to talk about LDR rendering. What I mean with rendering. The GPUs previously, or older GPUs, only support a range of 0, 1 for the color channels. That means that when you want to represent a color, you have colors from 0 to 1. You might think, okay, but what happens with the 0 to 255? Okay, yes, actually, that 0, 1 range maps to the 0, 255. Sorry, 555. But it's easier for doing calculations to think in terms of 0, 1 because of how shaders work. So we are not going to talk too much about that. But the important part is that we were limited in those ranges. So what's the problem with that? Okay, when you are executing shaders and doing calculations and combining textures, adding colors is a pretty common operation. Like when you add two colors, you are adding the red channels, the green channels, and the blue channels separately. Especially with lighting. Lighting, actually, every light you apply to an object is adding color to the actual color of your object to, make it brighter, right? So the problem is that the 0, 1 range is exclusively. You cannot exceed the 0, 1 range. And when you add maybe two high colors, they get clumped. So maybe when you add two colors that add up to 2 because it's super highlight the object, it will get clamped to 1. That limitation prevented realistic lighting calculations. Why? Because real light don't have a limit. Real light, it can go beyond what our eyes can see, actually. So if you want to get real light calculations, you need to get outside that range. But because older CPU's limitations, we couldn't. But well, we adapted to that. That wasn't a big problem. But then we started to have HDR rendering. HDR rendering is the ability to video card to accept the 0-1 range in technical terms. Now we have a floating point back buffer instead of a 0.55 normalized buffer. So what's the difference? Greater precision. You might remember that in some era, in some console generation change between maybe PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4, I don't remember which generation change, you can notice that the lighting is more realistic. Why? Because all the calculations, first are done with PBR nowadays, and second are done without the 0-1 range. So that allows us to create colors that goes outside the range of the 0-1. And of course, you do all those calculations. You are great for that. But at the end, our monitors expect ranges between 0-1. It's what they are used to work. It's the standard of monitors, again, in LDR monitors. So we have a nice image generated with lights that can, with light colors or pixel colors that can exceed the 1 range. How we can bring them back to the 0-1 range? Okay, you can clamp, but you ended up with the same results as before. Instead, we are applying a technique called as tone mapping. Tone mapping takes the final image and adapt it to the 0-1 range with in several ways. You have different kinds of tone mapper that deals with how to translate a big range into the 0-1 range for our monitor to display that one. So basically, tone mapping takes HDR data and brings them back to the regular 0-1 range, but applying some modifications to take advantage of this higher range. So before discussing about how different tone mapper works and how different tone mappers bring them back to the 0-1 range, first, just to be sure, it's usually set up like this, but just to be sure, let's see how we can enable HDR in our project, or at least check if it's already enabled. You can go to Edit Project, go to the graphics sections, and in the tiers options, you need to see if Use HDR is checked. Probably, in our cases, is checked. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to Edit, Project Settings, Graphics. You can see different tiers. Different tiers are basically select according to the GPU, and the logic behind which tier is going to be selected, it depends on the platform. But for now, you can think that in PC, almost always tier 3 is going to be selected. The tiers are just basically different graphics configurations for different devices with different capabilities. So in our case, you can see actually that all tiers has Use HDR checked. In case any tier doesn't have it in your project, you can uncheck Use Defaults and override that behavior. But in our case, we are good to go. We don't need to do anything. Right now, Unity is working with HDR rendering. So after that, we actually want to set the color grading to support HDR values. So let's back, here. Yeah, so let's back again to our post-processing volume. In this case, remember that the volume is the one that applies the profile, and we can switch back to high definition range. Actually, it was a better idea because our project was already in high definition range to work in high definition range. But those are kind of settings that you need to do before actually starting the project. You can see actually that the changes between the modes of color grading are huge. The effects are totally different. So this is very important to set up first. Okay, so now we have Unity rendering HDR, the post-processing volume. Consider that we are working in HDR. We need to do another change before actually applying tone mapping, and is set the color space of the project to linear. This is complicated. This takes time to to understand it properly. For now, I can say just set linear and that's all, but I will try to shortly explain a little bit about why we need to set linear and what is gamma. So our monitors, our regular CRTs and LCDs monitors, doesn't have a linear response. What I mean with that, if you have a color and you multiply the color by 2, expecting to have the same color but twice brighter, it won't be twice brighter, actually. Why? Because the way our eye works is not linear. When the eye receives twice the photons than other color, let's say you receive red and you want to receive twice photons of red, your perception of the color is not going to be twice lighter. Why? There are several reasons. Some says that the idea is that our eyes works better in dark because some predatory kind of evolutionary biological setting or whatever. But aside from the reason, the idea is exactly that. Our eyes are not linear, doesn't work in a linear fashion. Twice intensity won't be captured as twice intensity by our brain. So, okay, what's the problem with that? Lighting calculations works in a linear way. The output of the our video card to the screen is going to be linear, but our eyes are not going to perceive that. So we need to apply what is called a gamma correction. The gamma correction just takes care of compensate for our eyes like nonlinear response. So you can see here this kind of line that is showing that given any intensity colored by the graphic card, this is how our eye is going to capture it. And basically, that means that you are going to see everything darker than it actually is. So monitors are used to apply a correction automatically that basically the power-ups to the opposite of this exponential value that is usually 2.2, but the exact value doesn't care enough. So real output, corrected output, will give you a linear result, and your eye is going to see that just fine. It's complicated, I know, but the idea, what's the problem? Why do we care of that if, we already say that the monitor automatically corrects gamma? The problem is mostly about textures. Our textures are, or images, any photo you take in any device, you can see that they are encoded in gamma corrected space. That means that the actual photos or textures or PNGs, JPGs, or whatever format you want, it's actually already encoded with this curve. So when you sample a texture to do some lighting calculation, it's already gamma corrected. And that means that the lighting calculations are done with gamma corrected images. And lighting calculations works better, works more real with linear images. So if you switch to linear workflow in Unity, Unity will automatically take the gamma corrected image and will linearize it to work nice in linear, to then later in the final image, again, apply the gamma correction so our monitor will display it nice. So basically, when you switch to linear, all textures are correct from gamma corrected space or sRGB to linear space to do calculations nicer. That's the why. Again, if you don't get it right now, you will have time to investigate it later. For now, we are going to just see how it works easily. In this case, you can see how the original texture is shaded, it's applying the lighting calculations with the gamma space, in the gamma corrected space, and then displayed in this way. While linear takes the original texture, removes the gamma correction. Remember that gamma correction, it has increased the values to compensate for our eyes perception. Do the calculations in linear, then correct them again, so our display just works with our eye perception. And you can see that the results are similar, but not exactly the same. This one is much more realistic in terms of how light works in real life. So that's enough for now for about linear rendering. How we can set it? Easy. In your case, it's already set. But you can go to File, Build Settings, Player Settings, that actually is the same that go to Edit, Project Settings, Player, and here you have this color space that should be in linear. This is important to be set as soon as you can in your project, if not the first thing you do when you create a project, because the change is enormous. So now we are working with linear. Now we are working in HDR rendering. Now it's time to apply the tone mapping and see the results. But before applying tone mapping, there's a last thing you need to consider. Regular monitors, CRTs and LCDs, works with emits lights in 80 or 100 nits. Nits is basically a unit of light. It's how intense the light emitted by a monitor can be. Nowadays, HDR displays can have up to 1,000 nits, or maybe more in some scenarios. What means that a monitor is lighter than the other? That it can produce way much more colors than the others. Colors that with 100 nits we cannot achieve, more than the 16.8 billion, if I remember properly, colors we are used to work. So the more nits, the more colors we have, the more details we can have in dark and light areas. Why do we need to care? Because we need to take advantage of that feature of the monitor if we have one of those monitors. So here is where the tone mapping enters. Tone mapping does need to deal with our rendering going from ranges outside 0.1, and also need to consider that the screen that will display that image can have 100 nits, 80 nits, 1,000 nits, or maybe more. So tone mapping needs to consider those two cases. And we can, again, create a custom tone mapper, but we usually use ACES tone mapper or Academic Color Encoding System mapping. What is this? Basically, it's a standard tone mapping that takes care of all of that for us. We'll do the conversion from outside 0.1 ranges to 1.0.1 ranges, and also we'll take into account that our screen can have different displays, display lighting or different lighting intensities. So all these explanations just to justify that we will just set tone mapping to ACES and that's all. You don't need to do anything else. But I know I like for you to know what we are doing actually. So what we need to do? Simple. Go to normal tone mapping, set ACES, and you can see that the result is actually pretty different. Tone mapping, in the case of ACES, is expecting for you to work in HDR values, but we authored the scene not with HDR values, with another kind of values in mind. So when you activate ACES, you will see that everything becomes darker because you are supposed to work with higher values. So you need to correct that. You need to increase basically the intensity of your lights to take advantage of this freedom of getting out of the 0.1 range. So we can actually increase a little bit the light. Oops. Light. And you can also increase the sky. This is something strange. Let me just check something. Okay, now for some reason the scene is not the scene is not enabled lighting. Okay, so you can see that originally with a value of 1, and before ACES everything was brighter. With ACES everything is darker. We will compensate increasing the intensity of the light. And you can see that if we increase the intensity of the light, it won't affect the skybox, because remember that the skybox is not being lit actually. So we will just go to the material of our skybox and increase the exposure just a little bit to compensate, to get more or less the same range we have earlier. Because remember, when you're working with ACES, everything is mapped differently. So you need to first set ACES and then work. So we actually have little time. I will give you just 2 minutes for you to ask questions and do this actually. So let's continue until 55, and then we will see a few other effects before finishing.
Just a quick reminder for those who are already in the chat James shared some links about linear and gamma and tone mapping if you want to review something about Nicolas said. Also, you have some further explanation in some topics. You can jump from one to another in the documentation. So if you want to see more of that, please use the links in the chat box. About 2D environments, I really like to work in 2D. My jobs are like mainly 2D right now, so you don't need sprites to have normal maps. You can load another packages like Universal Render Pipeline in order to have lightning in in the sprites. You need to upgrade those materials, the sprite material to want to accept the light, and you can then use normal maps inside your sprite. This tone mapping and in general color grading effects are pretty cool when you use the lighting. If you want to, you're a little bit restricted by the volumes because not everything works the same. The volumes are made to you collide with the volumes, but into this a little bit different. But you can achieve pretty cool effects. This about tone mapping and color grading in general will give you the correct mood of your game. They will really stand out what you need, and yeah, that basically we're going to that way. So don't worry, Rod.
Okay, let's take some more 5 more minutes, guys, to see some other effects. So what we did so far, we just applied tone mapping to support HDR, and we have applied some effects, some tinting, or some tone mapping, sorry, some color grading to have this greener effect, but we can do much more with that. And one effect that I know you want to see is the famous Sin City effect, everything gray except reds. How we can achieve that? With another one of the controls of the color grading effect, that is the grading curves. Grading curves basically allows us to map certain values and adjust another values. It's different. It's difficult to explain right now, but in this case, we are going to see one specific grading curve that is hue versus saturation. What this curve means. You can see that this curve in the X range represents colors. So this part of the X range is red, yellow, green, blue, etc., etc., etc. What the Y value of the curve means? The saturation. So in this case, you can see that the red, yellow, and green values have some saturation. The green actually values have no saturation at all. The bluish have saturation, and so on. What does that mean? That the colors that have no saturation will tend to be grayscaled. In this case, you can see how a red is converted to grayscale when saturation is lower. So the lower the saturation, the more grayscale will look that color. So we can apply the same value of saturation to the whole scene to make everything, every color grayscale. Or we can just create curves that say, okay, this color has saturation, this don't have saturation, with this will have too much saturation, with this won't have saturation. And this is what we need actually to achieve the sensitivity effect, to make every color except reds to have zero saturation and reds higher saturation. So we can set the grading curves to hue versus sat, then check override, and then modify the curve to achieve this. You can see how the reds in this case are in the beginning and in the end of the range. So we need to do this exactly, effect. So in this case, I will just disable tone mapping. If you don't remember what you modify a lot of stuff, and you want to reset, you can click here, click reset, and everything will go to the default value. Maybe in this case, you need to re-enable HDR. It's actually the default, so, and re-enable ACES, and you now are in the default state. And here we have grading curves, in hue versus saturation. I will click override, and now you can start to modify the curve. In this case, you can control the curve using control points. So I will double click some area to create a control point. And you can see how I can move the control point to control the curve. In this case, I will move the control point to the bottom part. And you can see how the saturation is reduced for the whole scene to hold colors. And we have this nice black and white effect that might be what you need. But in this case, I need to actually create more control points to change the shape of the curve. So double click. I created other control point. I will put one here. I will put this one here. I will double click this one and put this right here. So you can see how the curve continues in the other side. So we have set this like this. So you can see how every color has zero saturation except the red area. In this case, our character doesn't have too many reds, but you can see that these areas, or maybe the globes or the A letter, is highlighted. And you can do that with whatever color you want. We can just create 3 control points here. Let me put that one here. Oops. This is, let me just increase this a little bit so I can have more space. And we can also increase the blues and whatever you want. But you can see you can isolate colors and create interesting effects. So that's one of the several things we can do with color grading. Maybe one more go to before leaving. Let's actually do something more interesting before leaving. Trackballs, another way to control colors. What trackballs do? It's the same. Every piece of control in the color grading allows us to change colors, but in different ways. In this way, trackballs allows us to modify dark areas, mid-tone areas, and highlight areas separately. It's like we can tint the highlights with one color and the dark areas with another color, the mid-tones with other color. It's just a way to modify different ranges of the color in different ways. So in this case, I generated this effect where the darkest areas are bluish and the higher areas are like purplish. So, and you can see how also I reduce the intensity of the midtones, generating this like dramatic effect, if you like. How we can achieve that? Easy. First, reset it, enable the lift trackball. In this case, I will turn it to blue. You can see that the dark areas are tinted like blue, but the other areas also. Because remember that it's not that it will just work with the dark areas. It will affect mostly the dark areas, but will affect in less extent the other areas. So remember that all controls affect different parts, but in different ways. So in this case, I will also take the gain, increase this, and you can see a mixture of bluish and like purplish. I will also take the gamma effect, and the midtones, I will basically remove the midtones. You can see how the dark areas and the highlight areas remains. Maybe not entirely, you can control it. If you want to be exaggerated, you can go all the way, but remember, be subtle. Maybe like this is okay. And we have totally unrealistic colors that we cannot generate easily, generated with this to generate this kind of eccentric mode. And well, guys, that's everything for today. I encourage you to not to do this right now, but do that later. Explore the different controls, just play, just break everything and achieve a nice effect. And the effects you are proud of, just post them in the bit.ly color grading submissions site, where you can share your experience with other attendees of this session. So just try different stuff. And well, we are going to do a little wrap up here. The same, please, to continue this. I mean, this was just an introduction. You will need to practice a lot, and the best way to learn is to share your experience with others. So go to Live Connect, Learn Live Connect group, talk with others, meet other people, post questions. We are going to answer them and discuss this the best way to learn. So, okay, guys, thank you very much. Daniel, if you want to.
Yes. Well, if you want to reach us at some point, you can use these like links. You have the Nicolas mail and LinkedIn. And for me, I encourage you, if you speak Spanish, I have a Twitch channel. I'll be streaming some of effects, VFX, and shader graph. You can actually do in games, pretty easy stuff. So if you want to see more of that, you can reach me at Twitch. My mail is at Narwocon is here, and if you need something more personal, you can go to Twitter. I will be there too. So thank you so much, everyone. Please join our Connect group. Everything you saw today, you'll have the recorded session. So yeah, that's all. Stay tuned. We have a lot of more live sessions you really want to see. This is a standalone session, but again, you can reach us at any time to see more of these topics. So thank you so much, everyone.